Hi. My name is Lainchbury. I am a software developer here in Victoria, an entrepreneur. And I want to talk to you today about open data. And just talk a little bit about what it is and why I think it's important. So, what is open data? Well, let's start with what's data. Data is like a collection of facts, and typically data is arranged in rows and columns, and we call it like tabular data, and we call these rows and columns, these sets of rows and columns of data, data sets. And when we put a bunch of data sets together, we call that a database. And people and organizations like companies and governments, we create this data, we manage this data, we maintain this data. You, for example, probably have data in your cell phone, like a list of contacts that you maintain. And companies maintain data about their products or their services, about their income, their expenses, maybe about their employees. And governments manage data about the geographical region that they govern. They manage information about the resources maybe in that geographic area, the services they deliver, the resources that they have, like financial resources and human resources, the people that work for government, and the contracts that they have with service providers for those governments. But what they have in common, all these different types of data, and the way we manage data today, is we typically tend to collect it and manage it and just use it ourselves. We don't share a lot of the data compared to how much there is. It's basically used by you for you. And by default, the access is restricted and it's not shared unless it's with specific people like our friends on Facebook or with partners. Open data takes a different approach. Open data basically says it's shared by default. And we go from very few having access to everybody having access. There's no restrictions in open data based on having to get permission or having to fill out forms or having any copyrights or patents or any other forms of control. Open data is basically open, meaning that it could be, you can use it without any approval. And I like to say that open data is basically data you can use. So it seems like a bit of a radical idea for governments, for example, who have data that is being used by experts, and they're using it to do whatever they're doing, managing a resource, for example. And then just to make that available for free, for no reason. Seems like a bit of a radical idea. Why would anybody want to do that? Well, it turns out when you share information, when you share it freely like that, people tend to do interesting things with it. Sometimes it's things that you can't imagine right now. But governments are interested in this right now because, one, they have a lot of data. Two, they want to provide better services for the citizens. And three, they've got a lot of cost pressures and they'd like to figure out ways to do more with less. And governments already release a lot of data, but typically they don't release it in an open format. You generally have to ask for permission, and you have to fill out forms and that sort of thing to get it. So I'll give you an analogy. Imagine to use a public road, you had to get permission first. And imagine if you wanted to travel a little further, you'd have to get some special permission. And imagine if you wanted to use a provincial road as opposed to a municipal road, you'd have to get a different set of permission. You'd have to identify yourself a second time. And what if you could only use those roads for certain things? Like you can't actually make money with those roads. You're not allowed to use them for business. And if you have a friend traveling with you, that friend needs to get permission too. You're not actually allowed to share your permission. And if you're from another country, sorry, you can't do that. It's easy to justify, right? It's like, we have to do this. Roads cost a lot of money. And we can't just let anyone use them. And then they're dangerous, right? Roads are dangerous. People could actually get hurt. So it's pretty easy to justify this. we have a responsibility to make sure roads are used properly. So, which sounds more bizarre? In 1983, the US government under President Ronald Reagan announced that it was going to release their GPS military system for tracking positions anywhere in the world for free. It took them another 5 years and several $billions to make it happen. There was no cost value justification for doing this. They had no idea what people were going to do with this data. But we get to use it for free. There's no fees, no restrictions. We don't have to pay a monthly fee. We don't have to sign in. We don't have to identify ourselves, and we don't have to ask for permission. We now have handheld devices. We can track where we are anywhere in the world. I have a GPS on my phone. You can have navigation in your car. Airplanes know exactly where they are now. We have geotagging, geocaching, Google Maps, Foursquare. A whole world of things are now possible because of the decision they made. I think that government data, and other forms of data too, but mostly government data, I think right now, should be made available by default public. Should be available to public. Governments currently, when they're making new data sets, they do what's called a privacy impact assessment to decide whether data has any privacy concerns or not. And data that doesn't have any privacy concerns could just be released. It already exists. It could just be made available. And we have a lot of challenges like climate change, economy challenges. We have changing demographics that are putting pressure on our social systems and our health systems. And to force our governments to keep that data locked up seems wasteful to me. We need to let them know that it's okay and that we want it to be open. We need to start treating data like the public resource that it is and make it available to anyone and everyone. And I think this will have a huge positive impact on our citizens. And we can't currently imagine, just like GPS, we can't currently imagine all the great things that could happen from opening this data. And people will figure out how to create value and how to create jobs and how to solve some of these problems. And what it's going to take is us making that data available to everyone without restrictions and making it data you can use.